Tuxedo hasn't been significant enough of a system to really take the stage for quite some time. That changes today.
The wacky world of MultimediaJay.
Kinda makes it look like a Delosaurus video when I do the lighting like this, but actually, it's all about Tuxedo today. Oh yeah, we're bringing Tuxedo back into the limelight for the first time in a long time. Yeah, sure, the Delosaurus with the Sandy Bridge or the Ivy Bridge actually smokes it, but I want to have a more hack job gaming PC system that I'm experimenting with. Because it's 2021, and of course, 2021 is not off to a wonderful start when it comes to PC hardware. There are parts shortages all over the place, to the point where basically new and upgrades and things like that for parts, PCs, etc., the supply chains are completely broken. So folks are looking at used graphics cards, buying used gaming PCs and fixing them up, and maybe buying non-optimal rigs and just running them into the ground. So I figure what better way to experiment with this than to take my AMD FX system and see what I can do with it. Because, I mean, the Delosaurus route is still viable if you can find a graphics card that fits in this little Optiplex case. Otherwise, you have to transplant all the hardware out of the case. Maybe we should do that at some point later on. But for now, the Delosaurus Rex project just doesn't seem to work well with what 2021 is like so far. Way too many parts shortages. There will be plenty of people getting into PC gaming by going off the beaten path, so to speak. So this spaghetti cable-y mess is as far as we got with the Delosaurus Rex project. So there's the Asus 1060 in there. It fits, just barely. But I think I'd rather have this card inside a system where there's more space for it. I don't want to risk anything bad happening to the 1060, because if something happens to my 2060, this is the card that I'm going back to. So I think I want to get this out of this tightly cramped case where it could be getting bent or bending on some things. It doesn't even have an official way of securing it with that built-in bracket there because the card's too round. I think I want to remove this and put it back in Tuxedo, and then we'll see how far the FX chip goes. That's more indicative of the kind of hack job setup that someone would probably have to get working in order to get into PC gaming these days. 1060 is out, thank goodness. And here, of course, over here, we can see there's a little bit of a crack in the hinge on the side of the case from trying to jam that thing in there. Yeah, you have to get square graphics cards, and there's a length limit to them. Otherwise, you start running into issues like having to unplug this front USB or buy adapters for it. And the adapters, well, yeah, you got to figure out how to get them to fit with this drive cage right here. So theoretically, you could transplant the motherboard and everything into a larger case to make all of this work, but why would you want to go to all the trouble? And yeah, there'll still be some issues with the motherboard design specifically, like having to get special cables for the serial ATAs, because the serial ATAs are in the perfect spot to be covered up by a longer graphics card. Yeah, when you go Delosaurus, you need to go all in. That means limitations on the lengths of the graphics cards that you can plug into these things. And with the short supply of graphics cards at all, that doesn't exactly play into building a good gaming PC very well these days. In the meantime, with an Ivy Bridge, Delosaurus Rex is actually the more power efficient of the two Delosauruses when running off of integrated graphics. So if I'm going to set something up in order to maybe use as like a second streaming PC or just to capture with HDMI or something with a capture box, this would be the machine I used for it. But we'll save that for another day. We got some other things we have to figure out in the here and now, such as, what are we going to do with Tuxedo? Behold, Tuxedo in full Geek House Dark Mode glory! Now let's turn some light back on. So we can at least see what we're doing, and make things even more dramatic. Ooh! Hey, by the way, you know what's really handy for YouTube videos? These cute little 5-volt lights with LED panels and stuff. You can just put anywhere, point anywhere, and you can use smartphone chargers to charge them back up if they need to be recharged. Or extended runtime, all that lovely stuff. So I gotta get some more of those. Those things are awesome. I saw them at Walmart. I'll see if they still sell any of them. So this is Tuxedo. This is my system circa 2007 to about 2016 when I built Monolith. I originally ran off a Core 2 Duo, and then I went to Phenom 2 1090T in 2010, and then it just wasn't power efficient, so I swapped out for a Skylake i7 in 2016, and that's what's powered Monolith ever since. The case design is a little dated as well. This is one of those old Chief Tech Dragon-inspired cases that I absolutely hack-jobbed and made sing and dance as long as I possibly could. But it was originally made for 120mm fans, so I basically put in a funnel for 140mm fans, and here we are. And of course I had to modify the hinge on the doors and everything because the 140mm fan is flush to the edge of the case. So a little bit of rust and oxidation because this case has more than a few years on it. But yeah, some decent RAM there. And an old X-Fi card. I've got old computer cards in here that I basically shouldn't even be bothering with using anymore. And of course I've got the Gigabyte Darth Vader motherboard. Let me actually see if I can remove some of these and put in some covers for these slots. Because I really haven't been taking this computer seriously for years until now. Another cool thing about these little lights is they'll slide under the case in order to provide light this way. These work lights are pretty awesome. They're very flexible and very useful for something like this. Yeah, those are my last two sound cards, an Audigy 2 that used to have a front panel and an X-Fi, and I don't really use sound cards anymore because HDMI does audio, and of course there's USB audio nowadays, so there's DACs all over the place, so you don't really need to be stuck with onboard sound. There's lots of alternatives here. So, alright, let's see. Let's put the 1060 in here and see if we can get some covers for some of these things. Or just use duct tape. I don't know. I have to have some around here somewhere. Just forgot where they were. And while we have everything emptied out like this, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the mint Darth Vader motherboard, as it were. Look at that color. Although it looks kind of brown in the camera. Maybe I should adjust the white balancing or something like that. Either way, just too bad it's made for AMD FX, so pre-Ryzen. We'll see how far it goes. Okay, the GeForce is in, and there's room to breathe, and I did manage to find some ratty old covers so that there wouldn't be any slot covers left open in the back of the case. So this thing is ready to be properly respected as a proper system once again. Alright, let's put everything together, apply power, and hope there isn't a giant fireball or a smoke show or sparks going up to the ceiling. We've had some of that stuff with this thing before. We can now apply power and see what happens. No graphics card and no onboard graphics on the motherboard. This should give us an error that the VGA is no good. Ah! Ah! First boot time, and the power supply already has power. So we'll see if we get some kind of smoke show. Full-on Geek House dark mode time. No, let's leave that on. Still gotta get this right somehow. Alright. 3, 2, 1. Hasn't been on in months. What happens? It boots! First try. Good. So I want to redo Windows 10 from the ground up, obviously, because this thing's been off for so long. So it has an SSD to run the system, and it has a hard drive to store some games. Let's set this up as the kind of hack job gaming PC that you would find on the secondhand market these days. Geek House Dark Mode. Delosaurus Rex. Well, I am updating the living daylights out of Tuxedo, but I figured, why not just update the living daylights out of Delosaurus Rex as well? I was going to update the Sandy Bridge Delosaurus too, but unfortunately it appears the SSD conked out. So I gotta see if this thing had a warranty or anything, or if it's just been powered off for too long and it just wiped itself out. We'll put it inside an enclosure later and see if it still works. But hey, while we're at it, the stronger of the two Delosauruses with Ivy Bridge and whatnot is still in one piece. Let's download all these Steam updates. Well, nuts. Here I am being like, oh, SSDs, I forgot I was actually buying these Orico USB-C cases for extra SSDs and hard drives because I was running out of space and wanted to convert them into plug-in drives. So here is, and they're pretty big too. So this is a 250 gig drive. The heck am I doing putting this thing inside a plug-in drive? This thing should be inside Tuxedo. Either way, let's see if the one that came out of the original Delosaurus will show up as a plug-in drive when we apply power. Something detected. Could it be that it just didn't get powered for long enough? Or maybe there's a problem with the power cables in the Delosaurus. Is that showing up under my computer? Delosaurus Rex. Nah, only it's powering, but it's not actually registering. Ha! Let's open the partitioner and see if things might have gotten wiped because it was unplugged for too long. Yeah, here's what it looks like when it's right. Here's the Intel SSD properly showing up as an additional disk when you plug it in. We should probably put the other one in and open the partition manager, see if it's completely wiped because it was, off for too long. No way, it's not showing up. Well then, I guess this is the same as if we plugged in an empty enclosure then, because the USB controllers on these things probably registers, even if there's no drive that's hooked up to it. Alright, empty drive. Yeah, I thought so. The USB controller is detecting, but not any actual drive. Let's see if that one had a warranty. And for those who wonder how I know if anything's going on or not, you might be able to hear this. These corporate refurbs have internal speakers. They're not all that great, but they make noise, so that counts for something. Roll-O-Vision. Ouch. This is painful. 3-year warranty on Crucial SSDs. Ladies and gentlemen, Crucial is the new Maxter. Whatever. I should probably mention my history with SSDs and emphasize all the more that this disappointment is basically the wart of my experience with SSDs. I wasn't expecting one of them to have this kind of a problem. So, I began with Intel SSDs, and then after the scare with Tuxedo, I switched over to Crucial Micron after reading a few things about how various safety features in enterprise SSDs to protect against data loss from power loss were being integrated into the consumer products. So I used Crucial for a couple of years, and then I just got a little too curious about Samsung Evo, and now all my newest SSDs are Samsungs. I was expecting that maybe one of the Intels would conk out first, not one of the Crucials in the middle between the Intels and the Samsungs, but that is my usual dumb non-luck as usual. Hey, whatever, we press on. It's not like SSDs at this capacity are all that expensive anymore. It's just, I thought it would be something else that died first, in terms of which SSD would be the first to go. Okay, enough playing around with SSDs and Delosauruses and all that other stuff. We are here to try some stuff out on Tuxedo, and that's what we're going to do. This machine now represents the off-the-beaten-path way into PC gaming. Nearly everything in this system is non-optimal for today's world. We're talking FX series AMD processor, so pre-Ryzen, not very efficient. 1060, so graphics card that's not the latest. And basically, this is the sort of thing that you'd probably find if you were buying a gaming PC secondhand, and hopefully you didn't get ripped off for. Even efficiency is not in the cards for this machine. When it's been sitting for a while, it can idle down to 40-something watts, which is down around Monolith's levels. but that is still higher than what the Delosauruses can get down to. And don't forget, Monolith has a bunch of extra drives. This just has an SSD and a mechanical drive for storing games. Speaking of games, ESO has recently been updated to include a lot of fancy graphics options. Let's take that for a spin on this blatantly secondhand gaming PC setup. Now this is the cheesiest gaming setup I've ever set up over in the project area. So, we got the camera pointed at the really nice looking ON monitor, so it's a Walmart monitor. I have a Bluetooth speaker hooked up, can't even be bothered to hook up real speakers, so it's not even in stereo. And I've got the spider tripod in the camera pointed up towards the overlay in the corner of the screen just to get some preliminary numbers. And as you can see, this thing is not holding 60 FPS, 30 to 60, but it is very much being cemented. It is very much being cemented as a 1080-30 machine. Let me just turn the vertical sync on. I don't think that's going to do very much. So, windowed full screen, it's set to 10, well, it's now 1080 because it's in windowed full screen. Custom high TAAA and cranking a bunch of stuff up that I would normally have cranked up on Monolith. And this is what a generation of hardware has done to it. Of course, there's a bit more going on. You get some 60s here and there when there isn't stuff going on the screen. But in terms of Monolith, it's a totally different story. Set around, maybe get some combat going and some spell effects. It just feels different using these controls. You can get, you can get some 60s, but the performance is nowhere near as consistent as Monolith is. So, they're talking difference between a Skylake i7 and a 8320E. Of course, I have to go back to a membrane keyboard for this. So yeah, basic ESO type stuff, here it works. But what if we start to get big long draw distances involved? Like trying to load half of Somerset. I could just see it on the monitor with my eyes, that this is not the same results that I get with Monolith. Yeah, it may look okay on camera because we're doing camcorder Let's Play style. So here's the plan as we ride around. We'll ride around Somerset. Matter of fact, we could always go to... Actually, that's probably a good idea. Let's go to Greymore. Let's go to the Greymore area. Which one is that? It's the Snowmelt Suite. I can see the jittering on my screen. I can see the jittering on the screen, and this is a good-looking monitor, by the way. So, and of course, watch the CPU usage as it's loading something. I've actually seen the CPU bottleneck when loading a lot of stuff. It looks like it's not doing it this time, but when I was loading in the game, the CPU is really getting pummeled. So here's where this is all going. So last year, with all of the pandemic and the lockdowns and the stimulus unemployment and stuff like that, I upgraded to an HDMI capture box that lets me capture my consoles. The plan is for any of these computers that I want to test out on stream, do like a Twitch stream or something, where we square off like ESO versus Tuxedo or Forza versus the Delosaurusus or whatever. The idea here is when I do a gaming stream with this, we will basically treat the computer like a console and plug it in with HDMI and everything with the capture box. We'll use the Elgato box and everything, so that way you basically see what you would see with only one display, and we'll treat it basically like a console. So I've got the setup for that now, and I intend on making use of it. So here's Solitude from Skyrim, and we can already see it can't even keep 60 here. But if we get outside of town, and we start getting larger draw distances involved, I think that's where you'll really start to see things struggle. But I can see just on the display that all these new graphical things that have been added into ESO are something that this system is really struggling with. Nice load time. So I guess the load time that gets slammed the most is when the game's first starting. So, but I can see the difference. You know, this monitor, this Walmart monitor is actually making it show up here. So, 54, 55, get some of these draw distances involved, or we can turn it up the usual, or we can just turn it up this way. Settings, turn up the view distance. That'll tank everything. Now we're basically a 1080-30. We're absolutely 1080-30 now. Now there's bigger distances in here. And we see the difference in the hardware here. Difference in GPU, difference in CPU, difference in frame rates and stuff like that. And I don't want to be fighting giants with 30 frames per second. So this is basically what I do on Monolith. I base it on high settings instead of ultra, so let's turn that back down to 37. So this gets me solid, the view distance down at 37 gets me solid 60s, right around here or so. Turning the view distance down this much gets me solid 60s on Monolith. That is not the case on Tuxedo. And this is where we're going to leave it. We could always do something like, say, a Harrow Storm or something like that. Something where there's a lot of effects going on screen to see how much this dips even lower. But as we can see, this thing is not holding 60 at all. Only when there's next to nothing happening. Hey, look, the Dragon Bridge. Skyrim fans will recognize this. But yeah, this is the difference here. This is what you get into with a second-hand computer. So you'd probably be looking to turn the settings down. So why don't we put it down to medium settings like it's an APU? How long is this going to take to load? There we go, you see? The CPU is getting pummeled now as it reloads everything that it loads when it starts the game. We'll come back when it's back. There we go. This is medium settings. So one setting down from what I usually play Monolith at, but this is medium without anything else turned up. So we can get 60s on medium. There's a Harrow Storm. We could always go over there and see how much it drops, and there's a lot going on the screen. But I think I've made my point. Yep. There you go. So you can get something playable, but you're not going to be able to turn up the graphics, even if you have a nice graphics card. Because just going back to AMD FX is a CPU bottleneck in and of itself. To say nothing of going back to, to say nothing of the ugly fact that Ryzen 3s actually can outperform a lot of the FX series nowadays. It's just AMD has made so much progress with Ryzen that a Ryzen 3 could probably outperform this machine. I mean, if a Ryzen 3 can outperform an 8350, what's to say it couldn't outperform its hippie cousin, the 8320E? So, a couple of dips here and there, but by and large, it takes a lot of people on the screen for there to be a frame dip. But the thing is, I can turn everything up higher on Monolith and still get the solid 60. Whereas here, no higher than medium. That's enough testing with this stuff for now. So that was just some ESO, but ESO has had some graphical upgrades added into the game that I thought would probably show the difference between the hardware between these two systems. Either way, we've got some streaming to do with this thing by treating this old PC as a console. We'll get that set up and we'll go live and we'll really see what this thing can do on stream. YouTube.com/MultimediaJay, Twitch.tv/MultimediaJay. It'll be one of those two platforms. But stay tuned, because we've got some more stories to tell with this darn stuff. The things I get into when I decide multimedia is what I'm really interested in. Hey, at least it dropped back down to around the 50 watt mark when idling. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.